Hello once again, everybody, and welcome to the Mark Richt Show. Joe Zagacki alongside Don Bailey Jr. Our show is presented to you by Williamson Automotive. As we wrap up the season, Don Bailey, it's our season ender. That's hard to believe.
It is hard to believe. Hopefully we got a nice, productive bowl show down the road.
All right, the Hurricanes are going to a bowl game. They will take on West Virginia at the Russell Athletic Bowl. In order to get to the Russell Athletic Bowl, you got to win some games. The University of Miami did that. They finished up 8-4. Got off to a really good start, had a very competitive non-conference schedule, began the season with 3 non-conference games, Notre Dame a little bit later on in the year, but at the beginning of the year, the Canes got off to a hot start.
They did, Joe. Everything seemed to be working. The running game offensively, Brad Kaya was making some outstanding throws. The offensive line was doing a great job protecting as well. And then the defense just seemed to grab hold of Manny Diaz's philosophy. And really that carried through not only through the non-conference, but through the entire football season.
First game of the year was explosive. It was also our first chance to see Hard Rock Stadium, and I think we're all blown away by it.
I'm still blown away by it. I mean, every time that we go into there to do a ball game, I walk down on the field and take it all in. And Coach Richt is right when he says every recruit that comes to the University of Miami and they see at the Hard Rock Stadium, they are thoroughly impressed. But going to the opening game, I think you saw the discipline and the conditioning was all in place, and Miami just started to gel from that point.
Game 2 was FAU and the University of Miami, crosstown rivals. It was close at the half, but some big plays, including Mark Walton, who had an unbelievable day, 3 touchdowns.
Yeah, he did. I mean, he did a great job that afternoon of catching the football, then running the football as well. But more importantly, I think he really started to establish himself as the guy. He didn't really take over that position towards the end of the season, but you could see the makings of something special out of Mark Walton.
I thought one of the highlights of the year was our trip to Boone, North Carolina. Appalachian State. It was a beautiful sun-dappled afternoon in this cozy stadium. They were really fired up for it. The University of Miami pretty much dominated all the way again, right from the start with Mark Walton with a long touchdown run.
Well, that 80 yards set the tempo for not only that afternoon, but also it set the tempo for what Mark Walton was capable of through the rest of the season. And I'm with you. The App State game, I was excited to go there, call that game. I was impressed by the stadium, and I was really impressed by the way Miami handled that football game. App State, I'll remind you, was a team that gave Tennessee just a couple weeks before all that they could handle. I think that a lot of people nationally were tuned in to see Miami get beat by App State, and it was the farthest thing from it. That team was prepared. They were focused. It was the first road game that Miami went on. It was not an easy road trip, but they came back victorious.
It was a very good App State team after they lost to the University of Miami. They only lost one other game the rest of the year. It was also the beginning, I think, we looked at the Hurricanes defense, and you saw a lot of tackles for losses. Really start to see the identity come through.
Well, the offense of App State was somewhat tricky, and you had to play assignment football. It had some option obligation built in for the defense, and Miami did a great job. I think Chad Thomas in that game came out strong, and the linebackers were running back and forth. And as you mentioned, the tackles for loss and the takeaway also. So you really started to see that defensive side of the football of the Hurricanes come together.
And the game that may have changed the entire season for Miami was at Notre Dame. The Hurricanes fell behind by 21 points. But from the second half on, since the second half of Notre Dame, Miami won every quarter. It was a great experience for the renewal of the rivalry, and the Hurricanes were a fumble recovery away on the 2-yard line from winning that game.
Yeah, I think that you'll never forget that, and out of all the games that you think about non-conference, I would truly have loved to see Miami experience a victory at that stadium against the Irish, of course. But as you mentioned, it was the second half. The adjustments were made in the second half, both offensively and defensively. And from that point on, the entire season was different for the University of Miami. They were a changed football program. They seemed to adapt. They seemed to have understood when the changes were made how to execute them.
All right, well, Notre Dame comes here next year to Hard Rock Stadium. When we continue on the Mark Richt Show, we will continue our season review, so don't go away as we continue right here on the Mark Richt Show. Welcome back to the Mark Richt Show, presented by Williamson Automotive. Joe Zagacki alongside my broadcast partner, Don Bailey Jr., former team captain and center here at the University of Miami. The Hurricanes conference season, a little bit up, a little bit down. Hurricanes went 5-3 in conference play, got things started against Georgia Tech with a great win on the road, and all these freshman defensive players were recovering fumbles and taking them into the end zone for touchdowns.
That was a pretty exciting defensive stand for us. We had two back-to-back on that where they scored, Joe, and I think really there was a lot of concern going to Georgia Tech. Now, not necessarily for Coach Richt. He has a great record against Georgia Tech when he was at Georgia, but anytime you have a young defense like Miami had going against the option of Paul Johnson at Georgia Tech, you have to have some concerns. Miami did a nice job handling it. They had takeaways, they had scores by the defense as well, and really the defense did a phenomenal job of adjusting to Georgia Tech's option, and I think it gave them a lot of confidence for the rest of the season.
All right, well, Florida State got the best of Miami again this year, but boy, oh boy, this was a heavyweight fight. Brad Kaya, he's losing a tooth. DeAndre Francois, he's going into the injured tent, in and out. This was as a hard-hitting game as you'll ever see. And once again, Miami and Florida State came down to a kick.
It seems to always come down to a kick. And I was impressed really by the fact of how tough Miami was in that ball game. As you mentioned, Brad Kaya lost a tooth, and the hitting that was going on and the consistency that Miami had in pursuit of the Florida State offense, and how Miami's offense was able to run the football at certain times and have success. But overall, it was a typical, and that's a compliment, Florida State-Miami battle. Unfortunately, the Miami Hurricanes didn't get a victory.
October was a peculiar month for Miami, went through a 4-game losing streak. However, the Hurricanes learned a lot about themselves, and I think really perhaps set themselves up because of the losing for the future, because they really showed a backbone and they were really unified.
I think the thing that I learned, and from all my experience in the game, is the most important fact is that this team stayed together. And Coach Richt talked about it early, and when he got here, is that when bad things happen during the season, you don't recover from it during the season. You've built that basis from before the season even started, and that's what we saw. He never lost a football team, but the other side of it is this football team realized that no matter how hard they thought they were working, it wasn't hard enough. No matter how committed they weren't committed enough. No matter what they were doing, it wasn't enough to get them to be undefeated during that 4-game stretch. So they recommitted themselves, and they had an understanding of the expectations, and it led to a fantastic November.
Well, you mentioned the fantastic November. Coach Richt and his staff kept it going, Don, and in November, Miami went undefeated.
That now, they say what? That you remember what there is in November, and that's what Miami did. And it was big games and tough games. And you look at the Pitt score, they put over 50 points on the University of Pittsburgh, and that was an outstanding ball game. But I think really what happened is you just saw a team come together. The offensively, defensively, special teams, and there were some changes that were made on the offensive line due to injury that ended up being very, very productive in the last couple ball games as well. And I think everything came together as a team, an entire unit. And I'll go back to it again. I think some of the losses and frustration that you had in October helped build the unity for November.
Canes won on the road at Virginia, at North Carolina State. Defense played at a high level. Hurricanes had a great game in the finale against Duke. They just got better with every single game and developed an identity. Mark Walton got 1,000 yards as well.
Well, let's start there. 1,000-yard rusher back-to-back. There's only 10 of them in the history of the University of Miami, and Mark Walton did it in 11 games. Joe Yearby last year was a player who did it. Took him into the bowl game to accomplish that feat. So that number one for the offense is something that is going to be a staple. I mean, in all honesty, if you talk to Coach Brown, the running back coach, he'd like to have a 1,500-yard back or a 1,700-yard back every single year. But the North Carolina State game, I think, really flew under the radar. That was a far more physical ball game than anybody would give them credit for. They had one of the best defenses in the nation, and Miami went on the road in a game that you could have been lulled to sleep in because there was really no brand name about North Carolina State, and they're not in the rotation of the ACC on a regular basis. And Miami went up there and pulled out a huge road victory.
Down the stretch, Corn Elder, Rayshawn Jenkins, Jamal Carter were tremendous on defense. Brad Kaya in the month of November, 10 touchdowns, 1 interception. Miami finishes up 8-4 for the regular season, 5-3 in conference play. Let's take a look now at some of the season's best moments, brought to you by UHealth Sports Medicine. We'll get you back in the game. Welcome back, everyone, to the Mark Richt Show, presented by Williamson Automotive. Joe Zagacki, Don Bailey Jr. Hurricanes are all set up for the Russell Athletic Bowl in Orlando on December 28th, a 5:30 kickoff. Should be a good one. It's Miami and West Virginia, a renewal of an old Big East rivalry. I can still see Kellen Winslow making a great catch on 4th down when Miami had a close game against the Mountaineers. But this is a very good West Virginia team, Don. They won 10 games, 10-2. Their only losses to the two teams that played for the Big 12 championship, Oklahoma and Oklahoma State. So a very good team. Dana Holgorsen in his 6th year, 10-2. Very good offense, good challenge for Miami.
Well, Coach Holgorsen has built his football team. When you go down the roster, Joe, you look at, there's a lot of red shirts, and a lot of those juniors and seniors are starting. He's done a great job in recruiting to his mold of offense. It fits that conference. He runs the pistol. He throws the football around. Skylar Howard, the quarterback, does a phenomenal job with his ball handling skills. He does a good job throwing it. He's got over 400 yards, or right at 400 yards rushing so far this season. He's a guy that can create problems for every single defense. They're well coached. They've been in some tough games. You got to remember now, they've played Texas and, as you said, Oklahoma, Oklahoma State, and they're a tough team. And he has plateaued this Mountaineer football team to this point. They were undefeated, I believe, through the first 6 football games, and they're playing defense as well. They've got a little bit of a hybrid defense. You know, a 3, and a 5 is what you're going to see, but they bring a lot of pressure when they need to. And Coach Richt wanted a tough opponent. He wanted somebody that was coming from with a great record that would challenge the University of Miami, and he got his wish.
Yep. Skylar Howard, 24 touchdown passes. They average over 500 yards a game on offense. They were able to run the football. They ran the ball for 300 yards against Oklahoma, so they spread it out to run.
Well, they do, and they've got a legitimate back, over 1,100 yards this season. And when you look at it, it really starts with that offensive line that they have. Every one of those guys is either redshirt junior or redshirt senior, and they've remained kind of healthy. They've been dinged up a little bit at one of the tackle spots, but the cohesion that whole team has been built around is Coach Holgorsen being there for 6 years, and he's in the midst of signing a new contract as well. So he's done his job of building up the Mountaineers.
You mentioned their defense at 3-3-5, kind of the way they used to play in the old days. They give up 23 points a game. Rasul Douglas is one of the top cornerbacks in the country. 8 interceptions this year, and they did a good job. It's a ball-hawking secondary with 12 INTs for the season.
Well, they're built for the interception. That's why they've got the 5 defensive backs. But those down 3 guys, and you throw in a couple linebackers from time to time, they are able to get pressure on the quarterback, and they've done a fair job controlling the running game as well. When you're facing a defense like that, you're going to have to give Brad Kaya time if he's going to throw the football because of all the coverage opportunities that West Virginia has.
It's fair to say the University of Miami has not won a bowl game since we were in Idaho in 2006. And Mark Richt, I think, has made this, I think the coach has made this a priority for the University of Miami.
Well, his philosophy that he shared with everyone is he wants to win the bowl game. This isn't about creating another spring practice. This is about winning against a quality opponent. And believe me, he understands the importance of what a bowl season's all about, and they will have some practices, and they will have take the team to Orlando probably a week or so before kickoff, and they will continue to work like this is a standard week of football, so to speak. But they can use the extra practices down the road. But we have to remember now, a lot of the guys that you want to get experienced during bowl season are guys that haven't played. Miami's had to play everybody.
Playing them all. West Virginia is a good example of having patience. You mentioned Dana Holgorsen is getting a new contract. They've also won 15 of their last 18 games. So right now, West Virginia is a program that believes when they take the field, they're going to win a game.
Well, and they have built it that way. Dana Holgorsen wasn't importing a lot of junior college players. He's brought in a lot of guys, even though they'll take transfers. There's a transfer from the University of Miami there as well, and they'll take players from junior college. But he understands for them to get in that cycle, and I think that's really all for about 3 or 4 or 5 teams in the whole country that you hope you can cycle through every 4th, 5th, or 6th year with a senior laden or a bunch of 4-year guys that'll put you in a position to win 10 football games.
All right, when we come back, University of Miami head coach Mark Richt is on the recruiting trail. We'll talk about that as we continue on the Mark Richt Show right after this. Welcome back to the Mark Richt Show, everyone. Presented to you by Williamson Automotive. Joe Zagacki, Don Bailey Jr. Hurricanes preparing for a bowl game, the Russell Athletic Bowl in Orlando, December the 28th at 5:30 p.m. from Camping World Stadium. Head coach Mark Richt is out on the recruiting trail. That gets us to recruiting, and let's start right here with recruiting. Some of the things that are attractive to the players that are to come in and take this program to the next level starts with the guy that normally sits in this seat, the head coach Mark Richt. He is one of the top 5 most winningest coaches in America right now.
Well, Joe, that's the thing is when you're being recruited, and especially to a place like the University of Miami, one thing that all recruits look at, and parents as well, is the stability of the program. Well, you are rock solid with Mark Richt. He's a winning football coach. He proved that with his 15 years at Georgia when he was head coach there, averaging 10 wins a year. Came in a transition year here, especially the last month of the season. You can see that how this program is going to continue to shoot towards the stars.
He's not only building a roster, he's building an indoor practice facility. He put $1 million of his own money into this facility.
That he did, Joe, and there's a lot of former players that are contributing as well. People in the community believe about the indoor practice facility. We certainly thank the Sofers for what they've done to make this possible, but now that Miami is proven to the nation, they have sent the word out to the entire country that Miami is going to be on par and now setting the trend when it comes to facilities.
The practice facility is going to be an indoor facility right out here on the practice field, right next to the Schwartz Center. That will allow the Hurricanes to go indoors on days where there is lightning or rain. It's also a program where he is developing an identity. Let's start on the defensive side. They look like Hurricanes playing defense. They are on the attack mode.
That they are, and everybody that talks about the Miami days, or back in the day, it was all about the defense. A lot of people think it's the offense, but really it was a defense. And now Manny Diaz has just done a phenomenal job of instilling his philosophy, which is aggressiveness, tackles for loss, takeaways, being disruptive. And these players just gelled all at one time, and they have bought in, and they're recruiting towards this style of defense, which every defensive player in the country is attracted to.
Coach Richt likes to throw the football, but you know what else he likes? Big plays. And he's looking for those guys that are dynamic with great speed on offense.
Well, that starts with speed. And the thing is, you want to always have the fastest guys if that's an option for you. But the thing that's impressive about what Coach Richt has done, and actually this entire staff, is they will play you as a true freshman. Some people talk about that and use that as bait to get you to the program, but Mark Richt has proven, especially this year, that it doesn't matter. You're going to be prepared to play as a true freshman, and that's more important than actually just giving the opportunity. All of the freshmen that have played were prepared, and they were ready to step into that situation.
All right, 8-4. We had a good time this year, didn't we?
Absolutely.
We had a lot of joy covering this team, and look forward to another great season next year.
Oh, absolutely. We'll have a great bowl game, and there's nothing better than calling these football games.
All right. Don Bailey Jr. and for University of Miami head coach Mark Richt, I'm Joe Zagacki. We'll see you next time on the Mark Richt Show. Thanks so much for joining us, and so long, everyone.